Be using a few different types of pencils. So the first ones I have are an H pencil and an F pencil. I use these for the base lines. However, because last time I used these they didn't show up on camera too well, I'm going to be using an HB just for the purpose of the camera. But just keep in mind, if I was doing this for myself, I would only be using these two for all the kind of basic sketchy lines, and then I would go over with an HB or a darker pencil like this, what's it called, Palomino Blackwing 602, 502, I don't know, the numbers really rubbed off on it. I would go over in that for the finished lines, but for the camera I'll be using the HB for the initial drawing. Also a eraser and a sharpener. This is my favorite eraser. It is, I think it's called Mayfed or something, softy. I just think they work the best. I will also be using a ruler. I'm probably going to be using centimeters because that makes sense to me, but feel free to use whatever you want. So first thing I'm going to do is draw straight down the page and then draw across. And like anything, once you kind of get this basic technique, you can then go and take this and turn it into something completely else. So I usually don't work directly with this technique anymore. I usually just go and draw straight away, because I personally find I can get the proportions correctly, but this is a really great way to learn your proportions. So I think I'm going to make it about 2 centimeters maybe ahead. Seems a bit small, but then 3 is going to be too large. Okay, I'm actually going to do it in inches just because 2 centimeters is too small, but 3 centimeters is too large, and it's just kind of easy to see on inches. But I mean, you can do this measurement with whatever size you want. It just kind of sets up the proportions for the rest of the drawing. So obviously if a head's going to be an inch big, then the rest of the drawing is going to be proportionate to that. Whereas if I adjust my head as like 2 centimeters, or you could even have it as like 1 centimeter, like a really small head, the rest of the drawing is only going to be like so long. So now what I'm going to do is draw these lines out. Okay, so now obviously, like I said before, I wouldn't usually use a pencil this dark, because all of these lines are going to need to disappear, but it's fine having it to show up camera with this. So I'm going to number them starting with 0 because no heads are passed, then 1, 2, so on. Okay, so this is basically with like 10 total, but you can do it shorter. Like I said, for different proportions you just scale everything back. I've just been taught, and I often read it with about 9 or 10 heads, so that's what I am used to. So between 0 and 1 is where the head will go, so I'll just draw in a general head shape. And then at about halfway here is where the shoulders will go. So feel free, if you want to draw a rigid figure, go ahead and do that. If you want to draw something with a little bit more like emotion to it, a little bit more attitude, then you can put it as a bit of an angle, whatever you want. So I think I'm going to do a little bit of an angle just to make it almost like a walking figure, but not too much. So if I kind of draw that line about halfway and then pop them like this, then that's kind of where the shoulders will be. So I use a lot of just like circles and lines to get that general kind of like skeleton shape, and then we'll go over and flesh it out. So 2 is where the bust is, so similarly we're at this angle, so we've kind of got to follow that down a bit. And then by 3 at the waist we're going to have centered back out. So it's like flat again. And then we can put the hips in at 4, about 4 is like kind of very lowest hips, like the widest part. So yeah, sorry, I was thinking, so I think I want it to come up again, so with the opposite side, so this kind of is creating like a C shape. So we've got an angle at this side and then going back to straight and then up here. So if you think of when you walk, if you're lifting one leg up and then you might be putting that shoulder down to meet that leg. If you want pose references, I suggest going on Pinterest. There are so many pose references there, or even just looking in magazines, look at runway images. If you look at any sort of like editorial images, it will give you a really good idea for poses. And knees will go at 6, so we'll put, actually I'll bring the legs in a little bit, and again these knees, because this hip is a lot higher, will be at different angles too. And then ankles at about 9, so we're gonna bring this down. I'm gonna have the feet slightly overlapping, and that's about where the foot is going to go. So I just forgot that this leg was the one that's lower down, so I'm going to put that here. So kind of like, it is hard, a lot of it, especially for poses, if you are working from reference, it's going to need to come just from your head and what you think will look normal, will look natural. So I just kind of draw a little like vaguely foot shaped blobs where the feet are gonna go. At about 3 is where the elbows would be. So because these shoulders are at different heights, the elbows are also going to be at different heights. And then we'll bring that down again, and then the hands will sit just below 4, so between 4 and 5. Again, I'm just trying to drawing very vaguely hand-ish shaped blobs to mark it in. I personally hate drawing hands, so I often will give her a coat or something and put some pockets and make them hidden. So we'll see how that goes. So there we've got our general figure. And like I said, if you want to do different poses, you can. If you want to do a more static pose, all good. Now I'm going to go over and add a bit of flesh. So I'll begin with the neck and kind of work my way down, kind of connecting up all the shapes. So the neck's going to come down from the head and connect to the shoulders. And feel free to correct any of the placement if it's looking off. If you're looking at it and you're thinking, no, that needs to be lower, it looks wrong, then change it. These are just a guide, that's all they're there for. They aren't a very strict rule of that's where you have to put the waist, that's where you have to put the shoulders. If you think it's going to look more normal, having the shoulders drop down a bit or maybe a bit higher, then that's what you should do. Okay, and so this is why it's important to use a lighter pencil such as the H or the F, because now I'm going to want to draw on top of this and really refine those lines, but because we've used an HB, it's quite dark and it's hard to see. It's okay because I've got a darker pencil, but it's definitely nicer to work straight with the light pencil and then build it up as you begin to refine the drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and outline all of this in a darker colour, and then I will add some clothes and we'll go over colouring it. Okay, so there we go. You can also add face details if you want. I often will just draw like a little line and then a little squiggle for the mouth. So really it's up to you. The face details the head's kind of at a little bit of an angle, so the line will follow more just a little bit off from this center line we originally drew. The eyes sitting about there and mouth about there. But like I said, often with fashion drawings and illustrations, it will just be a gesture for the face. I'm probably going to draw some sort of lips in there. A little bit of a nose. Maybe I will. Yeah, I'll draw eyes, why not? I often don't for fashion drawings, I think, because I want the focus mostly to be on the clothes. So there's a little face. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this is. So you just want to make sure you're getting all the curves of the body right. So these legs will kind of go out and then in where the knee is, out again, and then back in quite thin at the ankle, and then round off at the foot, usually coming in at the waist. The arms, again, similar to the legs, it'll be more of an out, in for the elbow, and then out and in, and for the hand again. Yeah, I think this is a really good way when you're starting off, and also because when you're drawing clothes on it, you've already been given a lot of the placement of things. If you want a high-waisted pant, you've got that line there of where the waist is. You understand where the crotch is, so you can easily draw pants in and know how short shorts can get. You've got the bust in there, so if you want to draw a little booby top or anything, it's already there for you to understand. You can draw some collarbones in. I often draw little collarbones in too, depending on the look I'm going for. And yeah, so I'm going to add some clothes, and then I'll go over how I colour it and fine line it. If you want to draw this figure any larger, my other video I did a few years ago, I got a lot of comments saying, why is she so thin? Why do you always draw fashion people so thin? And that's just, I guess, the industry standard, and I don't think it's right personally, but it is the industry standard. If you go to find a supermodel, they're going to generally be this like figure. But feel free to change that, feel free to make it whatever you want. With everything to do with any sort of art or fashion, you can make it your own in whatever way. You can make this figure as abstract as you want, you can make it as realistic as you want, you can do whatever you want with it, but this is what I've chosen, and I hope some of these tips can help you. So I hope knowing some of these proportions might be able to help you. You can easily shorten it, especially these legs. These legs are ridiculously long. You know, kind of like move everything up a little bit, and it would make a more reasonable looking figure. So yeah, I will add some clothes and then fine line it. Okay, so I did the drawing in HB, but then I had to go over it with the dark pencil just because I couldn't really see everything. So now I'm going to be fine lining it. I usually will fine line with about a 0.3 or 0.2. I'll do a 0.3 because I think it will show up on camera better, and this is going to be really hard to erase because I've had to use such dark colours. Usually using the lighter pencils and then the darkest being the HB, it will be a lot easier. But basically all you do is fine line it, and then I will erase it so that all of the grey lead is gone. Okay, so now I've fine lined it. I'm going to go through and erase all of the grey lead. Like I said, it's so much easier using a lighter pencil, especially when you're going over it. It's often hard to tell what you've already gone over and what you haven't. Okay, so I think that's as good as I'm going to. Okay. I think that's as good as I'm going to get it erased. Really, using pencil like that is just not ideal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and trace this out again with my light box. But if you have used a lighter pencil, then you should be fine. I'm also going to add little stitching details like on this panel on the boot and probably on the pocket as well with 0.1 fine liner. That's optional. That's really again up to your style and what kind you want. I think it really adds to the drawing to have little stitching details, even if it's not everywhere, just on little areas. Also, a thing to pay attention to is how the clothes grab the body. So with these jeans, I've added little scrunchy kind of bits at the bottom with little jagged lines and then a few poking into the garment. And that's because most jeans will scrunch slightly at the bottom, especially if they're going to be as skinny as these ones are. Similarly, I've made so the pockets sit just out from the body because they would sit a little bit out. There are another layer of fabric sitting on top of an already there layer of fabric. With the top, I've made it so you can just see the contour of her bust. Again, that's something that in this type of top, which in my head is like a jersey top, you would definitely see in real life. So it's about considering what the garment would actually look like if it was worn and what the fabric would actually do, and drawing that and representing that accurately. Okay, so I copied it out on a new page and I also printed out another one just so I can show a few different types of colouring. Okay, the first thing I'm going to colour with is Copic markers. It's probably best to do this on bleed proof if you have any, or if you kind of know how much they bleed, then it's okay to go straight into normal paper. I'm just going to put it so this paper, which can be destroyed, is underneath it because it will bleed through a little bit. I also have a colour chart I made up myself of all the colours I own, just so that I know to reference which colours which, because they are slightly different than the colours appear on the little swatches on top. Also, it's just personal preference, but I prefer the plain normal Copics, which have the chisel tip on one end and the pointed tip on the other. Both of them are like hard tips, but you can also get the Copic Sketch, which is a chisel tip and a brush tip. They also have a Copic Chow, which I think might be the brush tip and the pointed tip, I'm not certain. I don't like these ones as much. I just feel like the point on these ones I can get finer details in, whereas the brush, it's a little bit harder. Also, a few of the brushes on these, although you can replace them, they've gotten really dead. This one has been covered because of just like drawing over grey lead and stuff, but right at the tip and certain points it doesn't come out evenly anymore, and that's not the greatest thing because obviously then I don't get even coverage. You can replace the tips in Copics though, so I suppose I can just suck it up and do that, but I'm kind of would prefer to just buy this version in this colour. Yeah, also Copics you can refill as well. I know at least you can refill these ones. So although they're expensive, they are a good investment. Okay, so I'm going to go through and mark in just all the blocks of colour. I'm probably going to use the chisel tip just because I should be able to get a little bit more detail. And you might see me swatching on the side here, and that is just to double check the colours are exactly the ones I want. Actually, I might use a brush tip just because this is running out of ink and it's been sitting up this way, so all the ink's gone to the other end. Okay, so that was in E00. Yeah, the tip on it's not the greatest, so I kind of ended up having to go out the lines, which is really annoying. But next for the hair, I think I'm going to grab probably E44. Top, I'll use B32. So with Copics you want to work pretty quickly because once it dries, the next layer you put over the top will kind of add more colour and make it a little bit darker. That's why I kind of work in short segments like I did there, going up and down, and then the next segment just touches where that one began and goes up and down. And when I'm going up and down, I'm just moving it along so I'm not overlapping it too much. There will be times like there where there's like a little bit lighter, so I'm going to just go through and soften that out. And as you can see, it does bleed quite a bit, so it's come outside the lens just like not even a millimeter, but it's still there and vaguely noticeable. Yeah, working while this is still all wet is definitely preferred. Because it will just blend into each other a lot nicer. I'm going to go in B34 for the jeans. And I'll definitely darken this up. This will just be for the kind of base colour. And for the boots, I'm just going to go with C3, which is Cool Grey 3. So you can see why we had to put paper underneath, because it really bleeds through. And as you can see, I began to add a little bit of shading in already to the jeans. So what you can do when shading it is you can either use another medium. So often I will just go in and put a wash of colour down and then go with pencil and shade it with pencil. But what I'm going to do today is a couple of other things. So what you can do is grab the colour that you already use. So for example, the jeans, the B34, and go over the areas you want darker. So for me that will be these cuffs just underneath these little tucks. It'll be underneath the knees and kind of coming down the side of the leg. Here where the shadow would fall, where the legs are overlapping as well. At the crotch, which I've already kind of done a little bit of. Any seams will likely be darker. Just where the pocket overlaps the rest, the waistband. So that can just add a little bit more dimension. Also, another way to do it is by adding greys over the top. So if we put down a block of colour like so, if we then take, let's say, Cool Grey 3, we can go over it and it will begin to darken it. Then we can take another step darker, so Cool Grey 5, and darken it again. And we could even go even darker with a little bit of Cool Grey 7. And as you can see, that creates that really kind of gradient dark effect. You can also go over with other colours. So if I wanted to grab, let's say, B37, a darker blue, I could go over again and make a different colour, because when these are wet, they also actually blend really well. You can then kind of go back over like so and make the color a little bit smoother transition. Like so. So you can definitely play around with it. It really depends. Obviously with adding the greys, the saturation of the color is going down, so it's getting darker, but it's also getting grayer. When you're using the colors to make it darker, it's also going to have the saturation of that color in it. So I'm probably going to use maybe like a little bit of both. I might actually go over with Cool Grey 3 and 5 and then in with a little bit of this. Okay, so 3. It's also probably worth mentioning different paper is going to react differently. It's probably the most annoying thing about Copics is some paper I just put my Copics onto and they bleed like mad. Some they won't really dry very well, so it definitely is worth playing around with. This paper is actually not absorbing it too much, so it's staying pretty wet, which isn't necessarily what I want because it's not actually blending the best. Whereas when it's still wet, it will usually blend pretty well. So now with the darker grey, I'm just going to go over the details again. So that first grey, I just went over really where I want it to kind of have a general bit of shading but not be overly dark. Also, like with paints and stuff, you have to wait for this to dry to show its full colour. So as you can see, some of these go on a lot darker. When I was putting this blue over the legs, initially it went on quite a lot darker than it ended up drying. I don't know if that showed up on camera too well, but promise me it did. Now I'm going to go with the dark blue, and this I'm just going to use very sparingly, but just where I want really dark areas. Okay, and then I'm actually just going to go over again with this just to help blend in some of those colours. So the big thing with Copics is the first colour you put down, that's going to be the lightest colour on there. It's not going to get any lighter unless you add like a true white highlight or something, or you go in with some sort of paint or really light pencil over the top. But if you're only wanting to use Copics like I have, then you need to make sure the colour you put down is, you're happy with that being the lightest. So there you go, I'm pretty happy with that denim look. I'm now going to go in with the top as well. So putting these ones away, I think I'll use B26 as well as the Cool Greys. Okay, so stop recording there for a minute, but I hope you got most of that. So just using darker colours and greys to add this shading. Now I'm going to go in with E33 maybe? No, maybe E13 I think will be better. And the chisel end just for more precision, and add shading to the flesh features. That sounded weird, just to the body, you know what I mean. So there we go. That ended up a little bit more orange than I like. Didn't realise E13 was so orangey, but that's good enough. And now I will do the boots. So because I just did them in a grey, I'm just going to shade just in grey. So C5. And then I'll go over with a bit of C7 as well. So I'll add a little bit of, let's put RV17 for some lip colour. That's with Copics, so I think this is a really great way to colour it in. I often will also just do a little bit of colour kind of like coming down the side, just a little squiggle or a little line, just to kind of, you know, like tell myself that's what I want this colour to be. But yeah, I really enjoy colouring Copics. You can also add to it and change it up in any way you want. I often add a little bit of gel pen, like if these boots, if I want to be a really shiny patent leather, I might add like white gel pen just down the sides. Also maybe like a little silver, like what's it called? Button, that's the word I'm looking for. That might be cute as well. But yeah, as you can see, it bleeds a lot, so I would definitely be using bleed proof. This was just normal printer paper to show you kind of how I do it. Also another good thing to do if you are using paper like this which does bleed, you can add like a really thick black border around the outside, or even a thick white border, just to separate the colours a little bit. Okay, next I'm going to colour using pencils. So like I said before, often I mix with Copics with pencils, and I'll go over this and darken it and lighten it with the pencils. But now I'm just going to be using all of this with pencil. I really like colouring with pencil. I don't do it enough for fashion sketches, but I find it really fun. So I'm using these Faber-Castell pencils, which are also watercolours, but the fact they're watercolours is really, it's not necessary, because I won't be adding water to them. They're just the ones that I have. So I'll probably be using a mix of different ones to make the skin tone, just because there's no proper skin tone in this, and that really bothers me. Okay, so now I've done that, I'm going to add other colours in. So I'll add a brown for her hair. Change up the colour of this top this time, maybe like pink or something, reddy kind of colour. Okay, so I've done, just like we did with Copics, basically a wash of colour, and then I'm going to go in and using some of the colour we already had, but also some other colours, I'll be adding shadow. So I like to use other colours, especially when I'm using pencils, to make shadow. I feel like if I just use the one colour and press harder, it doesn't look very nice. Often when you press really hard with pencils as well, they'll get waxy, and I feel like once they get waxy it doesn't look like shading, it just looks like you've pressed harder in one point than another. So I'm going to add a little bit of this brown to add shading. I'm trying to keep a very consistent, pretty light-handed pressure throughout all of this. I'm just going over with a bit of the pinker shade I was doing for the skin tone before, just because that brown's a little bit yellow and I just want it to be a little bit pink. I'm also actually just going to go with like a purpley shade, like this purpley, pinky, maroony kind of colour, right where I want it to be considered really dark and shadowed. Okay, so like I just did with the skin tone, I'm going to go ahead and darken up the top as well. So again, I'm taking purple to add some shadow in. I just think adding a slightly different colour into the shadow really gives it a little bit more, I don't know, a bit more realism, makes it a little bit more dynamic looking. But like everything, if you don't like it, it's completely optional. You can just colour it in with a little sliver if you want, like I mentioned before. So often when I'm colouring in passion drawings, I'll just add a touch of colour along the edge just to suggest the colours I want there. Often I won't colour in the skin tone either, and just have the clothing be coloured like that, and I'll do the jeans as well. I also like to add, I try to add at least like 2 or 3 different colours into the shadow. So I've added 2 different dark blues, progressively getting darker. It just adds a little bit better of a gradient and makes it a lot easier to blend yourself as well. Okay, so that is pencil as well. Okay, now for some watercolour. I definitely with watercolour, I don't generally do a whole wash of colour over the whole thing. Watercolour is definitely the one I will just keep along the edges. So I'm going to just get a skin colour kind of mixed up a little bit. When I'm also doing watercolour, I always need spare paper, just because I always test out the colours. I don't know why I always do it with watercolour. I'm just always so worried it will go on a lot darker than I intend it to. So you might not be able to see this very clearly. I'm just starting with a really light wash of kind of like a flesh tone watercolor as well, because I personally generally just try to work when it's all wet and add little shading like I'm doing now, where I'm touching back in it where I want the shadow to be. And like I mentioned with the other ones, I often only do a little slither of colour. It's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm just applying it to the edges, and it kind of creates a little bit of a gradient that way. Most annoying thing about watercolour is waiting for it to dry. I am so impatient, so to be honest, I often just don't. But I will try my best for this video. I think I can probably start on the boots at least. Okay, changing up the colour at the top again, and oops. I also, because I'm very, I guess, I focus mainly on CAD now, I will always touch these up in CAD, so I will get rid of anything where I've drawn outside the line like I did just then accidentally. I'll fix up any colouring issues, like if I think it was a little bit uneven, I'll just make sure it looks nice and neat. So, you know, I think in digital age, which we are in, definitely get used to working in CAD as well, and even just touching up your work in CAD and making it look a little bit nicer, making it a little bit more vibrant or just a little bit neater really. Unless of course you want it to be messy, in which case go ahead and make it messy as you want. So yeah, like I said, just adding little slivers of colour is often what I do. So adding some blue to the jeans. As in anything artistic, you do really select what you want the image to look like. As you can see, these are creating really different looks to the Copics, to the pencil. So if you want something a little bit more vibrant with a little bit more impact, the Copics are definitely the go for that. This really creates quite a nice soft pastel-y look almost. So if you want to create that soft pastel look, then this is probably for you. I definitely think just give everything a go, try it out, see what works for you, what doesn't. So if I wanted to fix this up to just for not without uploading it onto the computer or anything, I'd probably just go over with white gouache or white gel pen and fix up the edges. So I like to just go around and do really fine things with the gel pen. Mine is literally almost out of ink though, so it's not going to do the best job. Got some white on it. So I've made it quite milky, as in like it's pretty see-through still. That's just so if I do go over any of the lines, I can still see where they are. Because I do prefer to go over with a gel pen. My gel pen is just okay, thanks for watching. I hope this helped. I hope that you were able to learn a little bit of something from this sketch. I would love to see the illustrations you create, so like tag me on Twitter and Instagram and all of that stuff. I'd really be interested to see that. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, let me know what kind of videos you want to see next. If you're enjoying seeing drawing videos, maybe I can put some of my drawings up. If you want to see more sewing videos, I can put some of that up too. So yeah, thanks for watching, bye!